Welcome to Writers Morning Out, a free gathering of writers of all genre and all levels, sponsored by the North Carolina Writers Network. I'm one of the network representatives for the Central Piedmont area. Today we're going to talk about submissions, and we have three people on our panel, and actually four. You can see I'm really on top of things today. One is Louise Dolan, who recently retired from teaching at NC State. She writes fiction and creative nonfiction with recent publications in the Persimmon Tree, The Rush Literary Magazine, Pinnacle Literary Magazine, Mini Mag Literary Magazine, Fiction on the Web, UK, the anthology Scattered, Covered, and Smothered, and the Urban Hikers Stories in First Verse. She also has a novel in process, loosely based on her Lutheran ancestors. When not caring for grandchildren, she writes with a view of the garden, beloved birds, and barely tolerated squirrels, fitting her walks to clear her head at the coast. Tom Dow returned recently to the U.S. In 2000 after 16 years in Japan, teaching French and English, and then received an MFA writing from Vermont College in 2005. A collection of his poetry, Different Gates, was published in 1995. His works appear in Tar River Poetry, Southern Poetry Review, Pearl, Tundra, Evergreen Chronicles, Harvard GML Review, Cape Fear Poetry Festival Chapbook, Red Clay Review, and more. He won the North Carolina Poetry Society MacDill Award in 2006. Dow has translated poetry by Japanese and French poets and is currently writing a memoir of his time in Japan. He teaches poetry in North Carolina at the Central Carolina Community College in Pittsburgh. And then George Kaufman majored in creative writing at the University of Pennsylvania, graduating in 1965. He started as a magazine writer and publisher and wrote military medical history on World War II while in the Army. He then was hired by Project Hope as a major grant writer before moving on to health administration. George received his master's in public administration in 1976 and taught various graduate courses in health administration and finance. In 2021, he began work on his first novel, Foam on
Nescopec.
There you go, Creek, which he finished in early 2023. He continues to edit the novel and look for appropriate editor and publisher, appropriate agent and publisher. Current writing projects include a sequel to the novel, a poetry chapbook, a nonfiction book about repercussions of people living longer, a collection of memoir-based short stories, and a potential TV series involving Benjamin Franklin.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I don't even know how to keep them all separate. And then Judith is going to kind of add as an Judith is going to act as kind of an ad hoc leader of this panel. She's an editor, scholar, novelist, poet, and recently a writer of memoirs. She assembled this impressive panel to help her get over her procrastination and fear of submitting her current work using the new tools. Judith, I'll leave it to you.
Okay. Well, actually, I had asked Louise to just start because she has given us a very useful overview of the whole submission process, and that is going to ground us and direct us as we go through this. George, were you going to put that outline up?
Louise, what do you want? Do you want an outline?
Great. Well, let me just say a quick hello in that capacity. Thank you, Judith.
having gone from teaching at NC State, I taught Spanish for 33 years and some ESL as well. To switching to, well, I retired and did an MFA out here in Los Angeles at Mount St. Mary University. I'm a newcomer to this. So, you know, I've published about, I don't know, 8 stories in the last year and a half. But so, you know, that's all I've done. I'm working on a novel about my Lithuanian grandparents, but, you know, compared to the rest of you, I am a newbie to this whole process. But I did just take, you know, several classes on publishing as a part of my MFA program. And there are lots of tools out there. But I think that the main thing I learned is that publishing, especially your short stories, to try to develop some kind of resume so that you can get an agent to look at that novel that you're working on or that you're ready to publish, really is just somewhat of a numbers game and a research game on your part. There are thousands of literary magazines available to you, not only here in the United States, but all over, thanks to the internet. And many of them accept submissions with either no fee at all or a very small fee of, you know, $2 or $3, kind of a donation sort of thing. So the main thing that I've learned is that you have to submit, and hope that your story lands at one of these literary magazines when they're looking for something that you've just written about. And you gotta kind of thicken up your skin a little bit so that you don't take it personally when you get a, you know, 80% rejection rate and 10, 15, 20% acceptance rate if you're lucky. So that's basically what my outline's about, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But many of you here, most of you, I think, have way more experience with this than I do. So let me just launch that. George, if you're going to post that outline, or Judith, what we've done, I've created a little outline that is essentially a kind of summarizing of everything I've learned in the 2 publishing classes that I've taken, down to a 1-page handout, which is what you're going to see. And it just kind of gives you the nuts and bolts of how to, you know, start submitting your work. So I'll wait and see. Yeah, here it comes. So, and I think we're going to share this with you as well, so that you have all the links that you can click on. Basically, you obviously all have to do the job first. You have to write something. That's on you. You have to produce something that you feel is ready for someone else to read. Maybe, you know, have that audience in mind. And as you begin to look for a place to land it, one of the ways to find a good place to land it is to look at the history, the publishing history of authors that you admire and emulate, that maybe have a similar audience to the one that you are hoping to engage with. And then in doing that, if you read their personal bios and you read their thank you page, you will find out where they have published in the past. So whether you're trying to get a short story into a literary magazine, or you're looking for a place to submit a collection of short stories or essays, whatever it is, chances are that thank you page at the end of your admired author's work will give you a lot of clues as to, you know, where you can go with your work. I have numerous pages like this that, you know, I'll just hold this up. I just make notes in lists of you know, if I come across a press or a literary magazine, you know, literally I just have pages and pages of lists of places where people that I admire have published, and then I start tracking them. I just start tracking them. There literally are thousands of literary review magazines in this country or available online. It's an unending list. And it almost seems a little daunting, actually. But if you narrow it down, you know, to the people that you enjoy reading or that you are emulating, I think you'll find that you can develop a list pretty quickly. So as I notice here, then on my list, look at the publishing history of authors you admire and emulate. Start your own list of literary review magazines. You probably already read a few and follow a few as it is. Many of these are available online, free. A lot of them are free or a very nominal amount of money. And many of them, if you join them and start, connecting with them, they give you free submissions. So there's always that to look forward to. But then once you've got this list developed and you're ready with a story or an essay and you're ready to go, then you need to probably join Submittable if you haven't already done it. There are a couple of other ways that you can submit your work, but the most common one that I've encountered anyway is Submittable. And I've given you the link on this handout. If you aren't already a member, you'll want to join right away. It's free. It's where you will submit your stories, your work to these different literary review magazines. And you'll see that you'll be on Submittable all the time. Once you've established an account with Submittable, then you have a complete listing of everything you submit through them. It always updates it as to where you are in the process of submission, from submission to under review to declined or accepted. So you won't lose track of your piece once you send it off, because this is the part that I think is a bit daunting. If you have a story that you're ready to submit or an essay, you probably ought to find 20 logical places to submit it and get it out there. So, first story, 20 submissions. For me, that's a lot to keep track of. So what I do in addition to the Submittable is the bookkeeper in me actually keeps I'm just going to hold this up so you can see it. I keep a bookkeeping, handwritten copy, the old-fashioned bookkeeping, columnar pad. I have one page for each story that I have out there right now. And this is kind of the way I do it. I just pencil it in the date I printed, the date I printed that story or determined that it was finished. I put the word count there, and then underneath it, dated, every couple of lines, I note where I submitted it, whether I paid a fee, what the response time is. Because once you've got it out there times 20, I can't keep track of all that personally. I can't keep that in my head. So that's how I keep track of it. I have a little columnar pad. Now, probably a lot of people would rather do it online, have a spreadsheet set up, but I kind of like to have it on paper. I'm just old-fashioned that way. And I can look back through it easily and remind myself where I've submitted this story, how many times it's been declined. I always note in there if the decline was just a form letter, or if it was a really nice decline, like, gosh, we really enjoyed your story. Sorry, it doesn't fit with this, this time around. Please send us more. You don't always get that one. That one's a nice form letter. And then occasionally you'll even get a letter that was actually typed to you, telling you that they loved your story and they're really sorry they can't use it right now. Please send us more. It has that feel of being hand typed to you. So, keep track of all that. Submittable won't give you a place to do that. And that's why I keep this paper record too. Anyway, at this time in my life, I've got a collection of short stories that are basically the culmination of my MFA that I finished about 1.5 years ago. And so I've got a collection of 15 stories. I'm getting ready to submit that collection as a book because I want to, I'd like to publish it. So right now I've got about 8 stories out to different literary magazines, or over the course of the year, I've had, probably 12 stories out. And that's why I keep this paper record in addition to Submittable, because it's a lot to keep track of, to remember where you sent them and, what the progression has been on it. When I get a rejection, especially if it's a rejection maybe a couple of times, then I'm like, oh, something's wrong with the story. It needs something. So then I'll go back. I might reach out to some of my MFA friends, get them to read it, give me some advice. What am I missing here? Sometimes it's just the title. I mean, it can be that tiny a tweak. But if I tweak it, then I note that in my my ledger here, revised, put the date in, new word count, start sending it out again to more places. And, eventually it works. I've published about 8 stories now since I finished up the MFA. So in about 1.5 years, just with, diligent submitting. Now, I'll go back to my outline here for you. in addition to Submittable, which you definitely want to be on, there are different places you can go to find out who is open for submissions right now. Sub Club, letter D there is a great spot. I'm still using it just as a free service. I've never paid the $5 a month fee, and it's more than enough for me to keep track of the different magazines, reviews and things that they note that are open and available for submission. I think I think maybe I know one person who's actually paying the fee. You do get more sites, you get more information from them if you pay the monthly fee. But I can barely keep up with the free ones that they mentioned, you know, because each literary magazine, you know, you open it, you read it, maybe you read a story or two, you know, to make sure it's right for you or not. And, you know, you can tell pretty quickly. So that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to do all that. So for me right now, letter D there, Sub Club, I'm just on the free one. Duotrope is also an excellent source for open submissions for both publishing stories as well as books and essays. I believe it has agents on there too. I have never joined that yet. I've looked at it in my editing classes. I know it's a wonderful location, and perhaps some of you belong to Duotrope and use them. Highly recommended. And Duotrope is also a way for you to submit your stories. Some magazines and some publishers use Duotrope as their submission point. Most literary magazines and publication sites do not allow you to email them unless they're really small. You have to go through a submittable source like Submittable or Duotrope in order to submit your pages. So, you know, most likely you'll be joining one or the other if you haven't already done it. New Pages is another one, letter F there. It's also free. Again, Sub Club provides me with so much information. I've never used New Pages, but it's strongly recommended by my MFA program as another great source for, you know, literary review magazines and other places that are open for submissions. Usually these sources too give you the dates when they're open. You can track that on your calendar. They'll often mention what they're looking for. Anyway, once you get into it, you'll see there's a kind of process that you go as you read about these literary review magazines in terms of informing yourself about the magazine and whether or not it's a good site for you. So part two, and Judith mentioned to me, this was one of her questions. She said, well, how do you maximize your chances for publication? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, basically, if you submit, you know, to 20 magazines, there's a good chance that one or two of them will accept your piece. So I'm not sure where we went on the screen, but my screen just got a little funky looking, George.
Oh, did that mess you up?
Yeah.
Something happened. Yeah, we
It's-
lost our
It's catty
Oh.
cornered.
yeah, we
Let
lost
me
our
let me get us back there. How's that?
there. Now it's back. Great. Great,
Yeah.
great,
How
great.
about that? I was looking at my spreadsheet,
Oh,
not
that's it.
knowing that would affect you guys because I didn't change my share. All right, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no problem at all. Anyway, how to maximize your chances for publication. You know, if you submit 20 times, there's a good chance you'll find one or two magazines will accept your work. So as you can see, it's a lot of work and it's a very tiny response rate. Even the professors that were teaching my editing classes said that's about their percentage as well. You might increase it a little bit as you get better and better at choosing the right magazines, but it's pretty hard to land a story in these literary review magazines because you just don't really know what they're looking for. You don't know who's reading. You don't know how many pieces were submitted ahead of yours. There are just so many variables that are out of your control that the acceptance rate is pretty low. But to maximize your chances for publication, be sure to read and follow the submission guidelines very carefully, because that's absolutely the first step. And if you don't have the correct font and the correct font size and the correct borders and follow all the rules of their submission process, they won't read your story. They'll simply hit delete and it will not get read. So that, yellow highlighter around that, read and reread and read again the guidelines for submissions, every single magazine is different. You'll begin to see patterns of what they like, and you get better at it as you practice. But if you don't follow the guidelines, they will not read your story. So that absolutely is more important almost than anything else.
So-
And then, I'm
so
sorry,
Can I interject something?
yes, please do.
When I submit, I use the guidelines as a checklist.
Mhm.
I literally, I get it ready to go, and then I go through go to the guidelines again and check off each piece to make sure, because, yeah, they may all want the same font, but there may be something just a little different that they're doing.
There usually is.
Yep, so it's really,
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I think, some of that's on purpose. It's kind of a test. Are you reading, do you really want to submit to our literary magazine, or are you just submitting bang, 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 bang? They want people to really care. And yeah, so, read and follow submissions guidelines. Don't go any further than that. That's it. That's so important. I keep a separate tracking page for each story or piece because that's me. I'm, kind of super organized in that way. But also I know that once I've sent a story out 20 times, I can't remember what I've done. I simply can't. It's not possible. And each one of these has a little tweak that's a little different. And, some of them have a 3-week response time. Other ones have, 2-month response times. Most of these literary magazines accept simultaneous submission, which means you can submit your story to 10 different magazines at the same time. But I have to note that and remind myself who I've submitted to, so that, when a story does get picked up, which you're thrilled, that means you got to contact the other 18 people where it didn't get accepted and cancel them. You have to withdraw them. So I think, in all fairness to the literary magazines, it's up to you to be just crazy, crazy detailed, organized about where you're submitting your work. They're counting on you for that. So go on to number 3, the responses. I certainly make note of all this on my tracking page. Read and follow submission guidelines, of course. You're going to get tons of rejections. Just accept it. For the most part, it has nothing to do with you or your work. It means that your work arrived and they didn't need it anymore, or it didn't quite fit with the parameters that they had. You just never know. If you get rejected 20 times on a piece, even by 12 or 15 times on a piece, it's time to look at the piece and see if you're not sending it to the right destination, or if it needs something. I certainly learned a lot on the first session that I attended with all of you on it was the one where we just submitted 1 page and they were looking for those hooks from the very first line with Tracy and Judith. I think, did you do it with her? I can't remember.
it was Ross White of
That's right.
Old City Press.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Thank you. I learned so much from that, and I went straight in and revised 3 different stories, withdrew them from everywhere because I knew, oh my gosh, this is such a quick fix. And it's just one of those little things. So anyway, keep track of everything, follow all the submissions guidelines. Remember that you're going to get a ton of rejections. Most of it has nothing to do with your piece. You just got to kind of harden up and follow the process, have faith in it. Let's see, do you want to scroll down a tiny bit to,
Am I missing anything? I think I'm missing something. This is an edited version, so what am I missing?
under rejections, I've got a bit of text under there. Can you scroll down?
No, so
Or
I can pull yours back up, or you could just read it to us.
Well,
Can Louise share?
only if the person in charge, that's the manager, allows me to. You have to do a
Right, yeah, that question was to George.
You should be able to share. I think it's set for anybody to share. Why don't you try it?
Okay. Let's see here, share. Go back to Zoom here. More. share screen. Here we go. And we'll take you here. Hopefully that's coming up. Well, let's see how I do that. Got it there.
Find the right one. That's always the tricky part.
Yeah, I've got it, but it does, there it goes. Can you see it now?
No,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, now it says I'm sharing. Great. So under rejections, I just want to, I want to give it this little perspective. Pretend you're trying
Louise,
to
it
sell.
would help if you made the screen maximum, because it's hard to read.
Okay, let's see
So
what I
that's
can.
not what you do. You go to the bottom right corner and slide the sidebar to larger
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
down there where it has a little sidebar. See that?
Thank
Makes
you.
it still bigger.
Is that better?
There.
Yes.
Now scroll it up a little bit. There you go.
How's that?
Good.
Perfect. So I like to, give the metaphor of a house being up for sale. Pretend this is just like selling a house. You always have to find the right buyer for your story, just like you do for a house. And if you've done your homework, identifying the right magazine or publisher, eventually you will sell your story. Of course, none of us makes any money from this. Sell as, in quotes. But it takes practice and determination. There are numerous variables at various magazines that we can't know: predetermined topic, angle, editors, deadlines. It's always a roll of the dice when we submit a story. Assume a rejection simply means that this time your story didn't meet all the variables, and send it to another press. If an editor declines your story with a "please send us more of your work," make note of that and send them more stories. Track the magazine's submission dates and details. If you send out enough work, you'll see the different styles of decline letters, and you'll know when you came close. And boy, that feels good. You may not have published it, but even when you come close, it's like, woof, it feels great. And then stay in touch with the magazines that gave you that close hit. Send them more work when they reopen for submissions. Remember, many of them restrict how many times you can submit to them per year. It's a lot of bookkeeping on our part, hence my bookkeeping, way of keeping track. But if you get into it, so in other words, you take off your writing hat and you put on your editing and publishing hat, and take the job seriously, I promise you that you will publish your work. You'll find a place for your stories, your essays, and you'll also start to develop relationships with editors and things. You'll kind of feel like you're inside the industry as opposed to trying to break in. And George, you may, and maybe Leslie too, you may be able to talk about that a little bit more, how quickly you can, even though we're all sitting in our kitchens or our offices and, operating through these computers, you begin to feel like you're part of the group. You begin to feel like you do when you go to the fall conference, and then you're in the midst of all of it, and it's exciting, and you feel like you're a member. By submitting your work often and engaging with these different destinations for your stories, you join the crowd. You're a writer as a part of the process, and it's very exciting, and you lose that fear of rejection if you can.
Good deal. Louise, I wanted to add to this on the novel basis rather than articles in
Great.
magazines. So I kind of thought I'd put some in. Judith, if that's okay with you, might I?
I'm going to stop sharing at this point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you could do that. Thank you.
Good,
Judith,
okay.
you're muted, by the way. You're muted, Judith. So if you had something you were saying something.
Go for it.
All right. So novels, of course, share a lot of similarities to this and in terms of process and what you should do. So I think Louise really had such a nice thing that she put together for what you're trying to do and how you keep track. So I finished my novel, and I've done lots of all kinds of writing in my life, and that was mentioned a little in the bio, but I never did a novel. And that whole world was shocking to me. After I finished a novel, I thought that was the hard part. I discovered since 23 that my job has been get an agent to even look at it, enough to take the time to read it, or at least read part of it, and then read the rest of it, to agree to represent you, to then go to a publisher who has to agree to take it. That's been in my limited experience, harder. But there are some things. So I keep a spreadsheet. So, and submission guidelines. So if you're sending in I have a 280-page novel, I found that every single agent, almost all the time, has distinct ways they want it. So just step back a minute. So when I finished the book, I was looking for guidance. I ended up paying money to two people. I paid to Barbara Kyle, who's an author. She's Canadian. She is on one of the national magazines. She does a bunch of stuff, and she does a lot of books. I mean, conferences and other things, but how to maximize your first 50 pages, all that kind of stuff. And I paid like $500 to her, something like that. And she did a 1-hour call with me, and she read the 50 pages I sent her and gave me a lot of good constructive comments and praise, etc. And so I found her very good. And you can take her on and pay her more, and she'll help you through the process of trying to get your book published. Then I also ran across a guy named Mark Malatesta, undercover agent or something like that. And he is a wonderful website. His newsletter is so good. I think Judith has seen some of it, and his advice is so good. And I paid him, and he was just great. And he won't take everybody. He liked my work. But if I wanted to use him, if you read his magazine, his newsletter, he gets testimonials from so many people that are really, really do really well. But it was like $6,000. And for that, he would do me for like about a year, and he'd have all this stuff. And I was like, 6,000. He said, look, no, if you don't do it, it's totally fine. Just let it go. And if you ever want to come back, do it. But he was really good about that. But I got his newsletter. It just came in, and I mentioned this briefly the other week. So there's an author named Croissant that published a book that was about bombing Hitler's hometown, it was called. It was one of Mark Malatesta's clients. And he got 9 offers at the same time. I mean, offers to publish his book, not to be his agent. And so he went to Mark. Now, he must have been paying Mark the money. And Mark wrote about it. And then he had an interview with him. And he said, so what did you do to get 9 offers? He sent out 200 queries at the same time. Number 2, in his case, his book was bombing Hitler's hometown. It's one of the last major bombing of World War II. Never been heard of. It was Linz, something like that. And I bought the book, and I'm reading it. I love it. But so he did 200. Normally Mark said to me, do about 20 at a time. So that's what I did. I have a spreadsheet about 25 people off of a list of people he recommended for historical fiction, which is my book. So I'm following his approach, but I'm just saying the variance is like all over the place. And I would like to just give you a quick look at spreadsheet. And I understand if nobody wants to see it, I won't keep it up long, but let me see if I can find it. It's just an Excel document right here. Here it is. I call it Literary Agent. And it's purposely reduced in size right now because I wanted you to see the setup of it. I don't care what's in here. I don't care if you see or don't see what I have in here, but it starts with the name of the person in last name. If it's green, it means they have my book or they're interested in it. If it's yellow, they were considering. If it's red, they said no. And if they're white, they haven't been answered to yet. So I just did that to keep track. Now I have agent. I have a category of fiction that they like, their first name, the date I submitted, what I submitted, a query letter and a manuscript, a complete manuscript to Bob DeForio. Now, Bob DeForio was a personal recommendation, and we've written back and forth. He's represented Stephen King, Ken Follett, Erica Jong. He's a big-time guy. So he liked my writing, but he hasn't given me any offers. But he's my big win, At least he has my whole book. And I update him about every 6 months. But I send query letters, and this was query letter. It's the first 6.5 pages, because that's what that person wanted. and they wanted the 6.5 pages in the email, not as an attachment. So if I may, you over here, I don't know if you can actually read this. There's a quote right from their site. I do not respond to queries that are not specifically addressed to me by name. I prefer straightforward query letters by email that get right to the point about what the project is and which show the author to be familiar with the marketplace. If you're submitting fiction, please use the first few pages of the manuscript with the query. See what I mean? Everybody's different. Someone else is using the a submission form, etc. So this is how I track it as I get responses in this response column here. Bob's first letter to me was, "Thanks for sending, Bob," you know? And then he wrote more stuff to me. Someone else said, "Ask for full manuscript, I sent it." And she said, "It isn't quite solid enough," and gave me some more correspondence about what I needed to work on. Not accepting queries at this time, someone wrote. Someone said, "Many thanks for writing. You have an interesting story. It's a lot to like, but in the end, I didn't come away fully convinced this is something I think I'd be able to represent successfully. I'm sorry to not be more enthusiastic, but thanks nonetheless." I don't mind sharing it. It is what it is. And we know, I mean, I don't like books that other people read. I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily that they're bad or good. It also is a matter of what you do and what you represent. So I have a database. You see me scrolling through it. I don't know how many that is, maybe 40, 50, something like that, with their emails. Here, like I have a whole bunch. Do not query. They were on my list, and my research said, "We're not accepting submissions right now." So you get notes like that. You could go back to them, and maybe 6 months or a year from now, they do accept submissions. As I mentioned to some of you, my book got accepted as a semifinalist this year at the Faulkner Society, and I had two interviews with them, one in person and one on Zoom, and they both said, "We're not accepting anything right now." And so I was like, "Why am I even talking to you?" But the one did a really bad job, I thought, of reading this, what she got. But the second one was great. She said, "Look, I don't do historical fiction." But she asked me a lot of hard questions about my characters. So she'd read what I gave her. And then she said, "You know, your book is something I'd like to read when I don't have to read." So that's the best part of the whole call, even though she didn't represent me. So, you get your little things to make you feel better. So anyhow, Louise, I like doing this. And this is basically a database put into Excel, and I track it that way. So I have to add a whole bunch more. I haven't been querying much, but I think about how many should I send it out. I'm along the 20 line, but each one for me to sit down and do exactly what they want. Here's somebody, send a query letter and 10 sample pages in the body of an email. Notice that. Don't send them an attachment. And there's the specific link they want it sent to. And the subject line should include your name and the title of the work. Queries should be sent to blank blank. If you send them to that, which is their actual email address, they'll likely be lost. So when I go and look at 180, it takes me hours just to get one query out. My mind boggles at that guy that sent 200 queries, but that's what I'm doing. So when I do 20 more, it's going to be a bunch of work. I don't mean this to be intimidating. I'm just saying this is how I do it, and that the process of doing that. Any questions on this? By the way, you can this is the technical point. You can word wrap all your stuff in one cell. It's just one setting in Excel. So you go to format cells and you do, I forget, word wrap or something like that. And that's it. So and I'm going to stop sharing that unless anybody has a question. We're okay on that? Except this does come with worksheets. Down at the bottom, you can add more worksheets, and I'm going to add sheets per work item. So when I do my next book, I'll have there. When I send out my memoir stuff, that'll be another one. When I do my poetry chapbook, each one of those will be a set of agents and information. All my stuff is here. And by the way, I back all this up in like 3 different places, inside and outside the house. That's all I'm saying. All right, I'll stop sharing that.
George, I have a question for you. In the MFA classes, the editing classes, a lot of times students were very perplexed about creating the query letter and how to, how to format it and what to put in it and all of that. Do you keep a sample personal bio and queries? Do you keep records of all of that so that, say you're going to submit one story 20 times, you can just kind of cut and paste and then, pop it in your process of submission, and then you can adjust it. You can edit it to match the requirements of that particular literary magazine or agent in your case with the novel. Do you keep samples of all of that somewhere?
Oh yeah, well they do. Both evolves and changes because of requirements.
Mhm.
And it evolves because I'm trying to get better. So technically you put your query letter and you want to get it in 1 page. Now, Mark Malatesta, who I respect so much because I see all these tributes to him from everybody, he said, because of your background, I think you should put some information about you first. He said, that's not normal, but I have all this stuff I've done. He helped me actually do my query the way he wanted. So I already had a query and then he revised it. So I have something about myself, but I felt that once you take a 208-page book, 180-page book, try to fit everything in 1 page, and plus about yourself, and you're like, how do I do this? It took me, I got it to where it all fit all right, but I didn't feel like there was any personality came out on me. It was all in there. There's a summary crammed in there. And over time, with the help of Mary, who I live with, and some other thoughts, I'm starting to get a better feel where I can ease up on things I have in there and just get a little more personality, because what you're trying to do with your query is you're trying to get a person who might have hundreds of these things per week coming across the desk. They go, oh, that sounds interesting. And maybe they even read the whole query, which that may not even happen. And they read the query to the point where they might say, well, look, why don't you send me 20 pages? Or like Bob DeForio says, send me the whole manuscript. But so you're trying to catch their interest. So I think I'm getting better. I don't think my query still as perfect as it could be, but it's getting better. The flavors, there's some flavor. It's not just a summary of everything. There's some flavor in it. My book's about my book. So you're supposed to put in there what your book's about. Then you have to put in it what it's comparable to. You should put in there a thing about what books, what authors, what you're writing, what does that compare to? So that agent says, okay, now I can get a better idea whether I'd be interested in it or not. And then so you do things like that. And so I learned finally, and I'm still getting better at it, is to say, so I thought my book was about what it was, but now I realize, no, it's really about in the 1950s in the coal regions of the mountains of Northeast Pennsylvania where the mafia was in control. And my character was encountering this particular issue. That's where I'm at. I haven't said a query out, Carol, like that yet, but I think that the story that's attractive to others, and that's what they said at the Faulkner's convention, they said, 3 different ones said this would be a great series on TV. They didn't respond to the specifics of my character and his struggle. They responded to being in the coal regions in the 50s where the mafia is fighting for control. So my story really is about that. So I'm evolving the query, I think. Judith.
And George, I think what happened with the fellow who sent out the 200 queries and got 9 acceptances back right away is that they were all looking at it as next big war movie.
Yep, that's right.
I mean,
and the title does it. It's Hitler's was the last place. All their supplies and everything had retreated there. Germany. It was their last place. And this was the last bombing run that was done by a number of those air groups that day. And there are a lot of people were killed, injured, and planes damaged. But yeah, exactly.
Another thing I wanted to remark on that I just love about your spreadsheet is that you captured the responses. I mean,
The extra
the
quotes.
rejections.
Yeah, I want the quote in there.
And what I really, it's my anxiety level is coming down just because they were so courteous.
Oh yeah. They
And
will
I mean, one even, I saw one use the word sincerely in her sentence and his sentence, her sentence. And it was just like, oh, real people over there being courteous and kind and not evil.
So yeah, you're right. And no, that's been a good process. So Louise, I wanted to, there are some differences, but I think what you're doing is also, first of all, it's inspirational. You work so hard and you're so organized. And I'm looking at the last time I sent queries out, I need to get more out. But it's good. But I wanted to characterize there is some difference between novel and magazines because I have a bunch of short stories. I'm thinking, well, because of you, I'm thinking, maybe I'll send those suckers out one of
I
these
think
days.
you should send those suckers out, just not to my magazines.
Okay. Probably.
Find some other ones. No, I love what you're doing and what I'm doing is so kind of, basic compared to how detailed yours is. I'm gonna, think about doing a better job of keeping track of everything because I'm gonna have a novel. My plan is to have it done in about 1.5 years. I have to go back to Lithuania one more time to visit in order to do a part that, I just wasn't thinking about when I was there 2 years ago. Now the book has evolved to the point where, I need to travel back one more time. So I'm thinking, 1.5 years before the book's actually done, but then I need to be in the process that you're in with your book. And I can see how much more detailed I need to be and, how much more complex it is than sending out my little 10-page stories. It's very different.
I'm a speed reader, that helps me, but I did tons of research and read lots of stuff.
Mhm.
I subscribe to newspapers.com. I don't know what I spend, $70 every 6 months, and I can look up anything in all the newspapers wherever I am. So I was searching for some historical things that I knew of, but I wanted to get as much fact as I could so that when I referred to them, I got them right. Or I didn't, and I changed them to something that wasn't the same. But
That's newspapers.com.
yeah.
Okay.
And that's it's like $60. I don't know, something like that. And I was able to find some things in others because there were, so just a comment. So in my novel, I have a number of historical things that I have in there that I feel really good about that people, until they read my book, most likely will not know, and they'll like that they've learned them. And so I have fun putting them in just to do it. Some of are very small little stories. But I mean,
So I'm doing a lot of research on, on Lithuania as well, so Vilnius, Eastern Europe, in the early 1900s. And for example, my character time travels. So, she drops in and comes back to
Nice.
modern US. And I needed to know what a glass factory smells like. So that's just been an amazing little journey
Oh,
to
wow.
try and figure that out. Because, I want to have her note that smell when she lands and then figure out that she's, in front of a glass factory because they were run in large part in the Vilnius area by Jews who were not allowed to do certain kinds of work, but they were allowed to do, specific jobs. And many of them worked in the glass factories and they were instrumental in developing the progress to plate glass and different things. They were doing mirrors and all sorts of cutting edge, glass production back in the early 1900s. But I didn't know what it smelled like. And so it was such a fun thing to research that and try and figure it out. I've even met a couple of people now who have talked to me about what it smells like, because blowing glass is one thing. The furnaces that they use to where they produce this glass is a very different smell. So anyway, little stuff like that. It's a lot of fun.
Well, it is. And then when someone reads your book, you feel good that they get to know what the smell of glass is like, and they probably would never have done that otherwise.
No, for sure.
So that was fun, Judith.
I think Les has something to say.
Well,
Yes.
Good. I have a different attitude towards this whole submission kind of thing. I never took it too seriously, but I had a run of luck in the last few months. So I had some stories published, and then I had someone ask for more stories, and then someone wrote a nice letter and sent me other publications, even though they couldn't use the story. So I decided, first of all, this submission business gets me very angry because they we as people who submit, if it's a business for them, and we give them our work for nothing, basically. They put many restraints on how they're supposed to get it, and I can understand that, but there'll be a 4 or 6 month delay before you hear about it. Um, so I didn't take it too seriously, but here's what I've done lately. Um, I set up a folder for each story, and in that folder I have a spreadsheet, but very, very limited because I don't want to do any work for this. I'm just doing it because I enjoy writing. And any bookkeeping and any tracking has to be so minimal that it doesn't take away from the writing. It's just a hobby. So I have about 5 different columns. In the folder, I have the story. I have a separate folder within that folder of all the previous uh, manifest manifestations of that story, what it looked like, and then I have the final story. And then in the spreadsheet, in that folder for each story, I have the magazine, the name of the editor. These are all columns. The date, how much it cost to submit, and whether it was accepted or whether it was rejected. I have passed. I don't like the word rejection. I write passed on that. And then I have standardized for all the stories an inquiry letter, which is about 3 lines for a short story, a biography, which is already set up, and a withdrawal letter. Because lately I found I have to withdraw from different submissions because I have to do that. And it's all standardized. And then for some of the stories, I'll write a short introduction, maybe a tiny paragraph that's catchy, that even if it's a short story, so they may want to read it. And for where to submit it, I haven't submitted a lot this last month. The stories that were accepted, I only submitted to 5 magazines for each story, and it was just pure luck. So where I am getting the submissions now would be from Duotrope, and for some of the more prominent places and contests cost money, and I'm not too big on that, you know. So I'm not sure whether or not some of these places are out just to take your money, or whether or not they're legitimate. So I'm looking at the back of the short story collection that my class is reading. And in the back, it has a little blip about each of the authors and which contests they've run. So I now know which are the acceptable things. So if it costs $20 or $30 to submit to a contest, maybe I'll do like you mentioned last time, Louise, I'll do maybe 2 or 3 a year. But I better have that story really well polished and have confidence in it. So I look at it kind of, I'm not too serious about it in the submission part, I'm sorry to say, but I just like the writing part. And I really believe that it doesn't matter if there are thousands of these places where you can place your work, and someone is waiting for your work somewhere. So, you know,
Congratulations on your acceptance rate.
it was
Your
luck,
stories
my
must
luck.
be amazing, but you've also done some homework in choosing where to send them, I think. And that's a big part of it. You didn't send them to an inappropriate place. You looked carefully and sent them to a place that matched your style. And your story is good. So congratulations. That's
Well, I don't know if
huge.
it's good, but it was accepted. I'm just saying, for everybody out here, there's a place where your story is going to find a home. There's just, you know, but that's my system. It's kind of lackadaisical, not too serious. You know, I did have a pottery business once, and I was dealing with 28 stores, and you had to know what you were doing. And I had a catalog, and I had like 28 different 28 different pieces that I made. So this is different. I don't want to deal with any of that stuff.
That's good though.
Anyway, that's my bit. So,
Well, I
Cal?
think you sound pretty serious.
Yeah.
well, not really. My wife is my editor. She takes care of all of that stuff.
Good
So.
for her.
Yeah.
We haven't heard from Tom this afternoon, who's done an awful lot of submitting.
Well, and Tom will probably tell us how poetry submissions are different. And I thank you for mentioning Tom, because Tom, I don't know you, and I made myself a note to say we should turn this over to Tom, because it's gonna be a different process.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I really got a lot out of what's been revealed about all of these processes for submission. It's really good. I've taken copious notes, so very, very helpful. So, and for poetry, a lot of things are the same. So I'll very carefully not repeat stuff. But I would like to say, or take a different angle on it, and maybe this is poetic, I don't know, but probably, at least for me, the main value of submitting work is to validate my writing. You know, I don't really want to care that much about what gets published. Of course, you know, it matters to me, of course, but I just feel that if I'm going to respect what I write, then I want to follow through with a serious submission. And it's that kind of position that, for me, makes submitting my work the most valuable. So, anyhow, that's not tangible, but that's what I like about it. That said, for poetry, there are three levels generally to work with. One is the individual poem, and most poems are pretty short. There's the small collection or group cluster of poems, up to, let's say, a chapbook, and then, of course, an actual book collection of poetry. And essentially, the submission process is going to be the same, except there are those three levels, and they all work into each other. So, in many different ways you can imagine, it's important to keep track of what's going where and why, and how things fit together in either tiny clusters, like a lot of places will take 3 poems. But of course, chapbook submissions, or especially contests and so forth, are a lot more complex. So I too absolutely have to keep what I call a log of my submissions. And I've been doing that for 30 years. And even before I had a computer. So I figure if it works, why fix it? 30 years ago, I bought this silly little kid's notebook in Japan, even though it's in English. And I've used it to record all of my submissions, you know, as has been so carefully laid out. Details vary according to need. I like to feel that I don't have to write down everything in many, many cases, but it's flexible, and I do it, and it's the only responsible way for me to submit work. So, anyhow, that said, there are a couple other little things I'd like to say. I certainly agree that you know, you've got to look at work that, and I find poems that I like poets that I like and find out, of course, where and how they've been published, individual poems, chapbooks, books, whatever it is. There's so much out there. And if I'm guided by what I like and that obviously I can relate to other people's work, that it saves so much time, so that, along with a couple other things here, taking some notes. Let me just double check this real quick. So let's see. Okay. Also, I just like to say that I do better work as a poet when I know I'm going to submit. I tend to be a little bit lazy. I write poetry for fun. It entertains me. And I like to share it, like at readings. And of course, readings are a good step into submission. And I've had poems published because someone at a reading heard me read and said, "Oh, why don't you submit there or there, or, to that person?" So you never know if you're out there and busy, sharing your work, what is going to result. And sometimes it's very, very surprising. So I've been published. I found out I had one poem placed that I did not submit. And I think somebody saw my poem and sent it to somebody, never told me about it, but it got published. So I decided, well, that's not right, but I wasn't going to argue. It had my name on it.
It got published with your name.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
with my, yeah. So I thought, there are a lot of things that go on out there that, I don't feel I have to absolutely understand, in the very same way as, of course, rejection letters can be really interesting. I collect them. But I did get a rejection letter from a magazine that I had sent 3 poems to. And the letter thanked me for submitting my story that they couldn't use. So again, I'm doing this for Judith.
I just said, oops.
Yeah. It just, if it's not fun, if it's not a little bit strange, it wouldn't be worth doing. So I figure I've got to be okay with all kinds of weird things too. And I think the ultimate point I want to make is, when I am successful in submitting my work, it's usually because I have a plan. And I try to, at times, make my minimal submission schedule is 1 poem, 1 cluster of poems, or 1 chapbook per month as a minimum. I can, of course, change that or submit more. But I have found that simple discipline of knowing that I'm going to be doing that has amazing results. And somehow I don't worry about it as much. It's just part of my, again, response to sharing my work. So
Tom,
anyway,
Tom,
that
is that so? When you do 1 poem or 1 cluster per month, is that to one place, or does that imply you're sending it to multiple places?
whatever I feel like doing, actually,
Okay.
But
Yep.
at least I know I'm going to send out 1 submission of something somewhere every month. And of course, with all of the very, very beautiful, careful criteria that you all have already explained so nicely. But yes, I agree. I have to do that too. Be very careful about everything, the guidelines, all of that, right? Of course. So I won't repeat any of that.
Tom,
But
that's excellent. That's excellent advice. In my MFA editorial or editing classes, that's what both instructors that I studied under said, that once a week, they both happen to choose Saturdays. They took the writing hat off and they put the submission hat on. and they did nothing but submissions for 4 hours or whatever,
Yeah.
whatever was their plan. Every Saturday morning, it's submission time. And whether they did one submission that day or one poem or one story to 10 places, whatever it was, on Saturdays, they weren't a writer, they were a submitter. And had a discipline to it. And they would go back over their submissions, make sure they were up to date. You know, many of us go to Submittable to look up, you know, just to make sure
Yeah.
we haven't missed anything. See if something's gone way past the expected response time, you know, be your bookkeeper once a week. That discipline is really important. And if you really want to get your work published, I mean, if you're really serious about it, that you have to wear that other hat on a regular basis.
Yeah, and thank you. And part of it is, you know, other quirky things like some magazines and so forth are much more likely to publish you if you subscribe. So, you know, there's a calculation there. You know, how badly do you want it at some particular place? It's amazing, especially for maybe something like poetry or stories, how much difference that might make. I hate to say it, but you know, that's what I've discovered. In fact, been directly told by some publishers, you know, if you subscribe, we'll publish you. I was really offended until I decided it wasn't worth the trouble being offended. You know,
Many of the literary magazines, if you join them, you know, you'll get either the monthly ability to read, or you get a quarterly copy in the mail, whatever you choose. They will give you X number of submissions per year, or if you're a member, it's always open submission, though you can only submit X number of times per year, but you don't have to follow the submission date guidelines. They allow you as a member to submit anytime. So again, each magazine, each location is different. But joining them helps support everybody, right? So, you know, if you're thinking about it from that standpoint, it means everybody gets read. But also it does buy you a little more clout.
Wow, Tom, I never thought about that. Thank you for that. 'Cause
I
that's right.
never heard that. Thank you. That's news to me.
That's like a really basic thing that seems like one ought to know.
well,
Well,
it's
and
just one of the things that you know, slowly sort of became apparent. And of course, you know, it's always true that it's not the case also many times. So who knows? I'm just trying to make the point that you don't always know what to expect, right? And that's certainly always part of it for me and part of the fun. You know, if I'm not enjoying it, then I have to ask myself what I think I'm doing. But anyway, the only other point, just to sum up, basically, is that I really like to think of submitting work as a response. You know, again, it's topical. Some publications, journals, whatever, have different scheduled themes. You can respond to current events, or, you know, all kinds of things like that that are very interesting to keep track of. And I think that makes me feel engaged in the process, and also I get much better results. So anyhow, and those things pop up, you know, in the communications from especially magazines, journals, and so forth. So even the AMA, American Medical Association, publishes poetry. So poetry has a way of, you know, subversive quality of kind of being allowed in, even when you might not expect it. And oddly enough, even doctors like to read poems. So, you know,
some even write poems.
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's all part of the fun. But anyway, just glad I had a chance to share a couple ideas here, and really have learned so much from you all about this. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Well,
Judith, what do you think? Do we have more we need to do? We're like
well, if y'all have more to say, certainly do. But I do want to thank everybody for showing up, and our panelists for sharing so much useful information with us. I feel like I'm going to get cracking now. My anxiety levels are going down.
Hey, I do
Thank
want to
you.
say, if anybody wants my spreadsheet, I'll share it openly. I don't care. Have them just write to you if you don't have my email, and tell me and I'll send it out. If anybody wants it, feel free to use it, modify it, whatever, or just look at it. I don't mind sharing it. You can have all the stuff that's in it, even my rejections and all. Just want to say, thank you, Judith.
Well, I
Judith,
was-
could I ask, are you going to share my handout with everybody? You have the ability to do that, right? Because you have my permission.
don't we, George and Carol? We can share that handout with everybody, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I
Okay.
wasn't,
Great.
who was going to do it. Yeah, please do.
Excellent.
Errol, you're muted.
I'm sorry that I had to disappear. But yes, and one you would like us to share, Louise, if you would send it to me. Slowly getting the Google Drive up and running, which will carry then both the recording and any handouts. And it'll include all programs for which we have recordings or handouts. Penny is helping me finalize this, so that's good. And yes, thank you all for coming, and thank you,
Oh, thank you.
Louise and George and Tom, for sharing all of your great knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Yes,
Guys.
thank you.
Thank you to everyone.